is the contested area, the Donbass region, right? Let me actually clear that and put that in red. That's the area where they had been fighting for 8 years. Yeah. Understandably, there are, at the beginning, 50 to 60% of Ukraine's combat forces were in that area. They probably anticipated, but of course, then we learned later that Belarus cooperated, troops came in toward Kiev, there were other military exercises here moving in this direction. Once you determine what your enemy's main effort actually is, and it's clearly become Kiev, then I think it's evident that they've relocated some. And we talked about this almost on day 1 or 2 of this at this map. So when you make that reallocation of resources that Joey's talking about, then of course you're going to lose some ground over here. As Russians say, we're fighting a thinner force. They bring in the artillery. They try to soften the target. You've got civilians fleeing. And they also had the advantage of coming in a two-pronged approach. And that's what, when we talk about Mariupol and what the horrific humanitarian conditions there, it's because you've got Russians coming from both the east and the west. And now they're close enough that they can use artillery as well. It's not just other forms of munitions. So this is the main effort, Rachel. The Russians certainly want to cut off, and that's why you've seen additional bombings in the west. They want to cut off the resupply. They want to cut off the convoys of Stingers and Javelins and other new weapon systems and fighters, frankly, coming in. And if they can, of course, they'd love to punch through here. And when we talked to Jonathan Hunt earlier, he said this is more or less rural terrain in between the south and the north. So what's holding the Russians up across the board are big cities, which are very difficult to enter into and very difficult to occupy. And so they either, shell them or they bypass them as they move along. Rachel, you look like you got a question.
Well, when he spoke to the guest said the time now is to resupply the Ukrainians. The time now is to do that. We talked to other guests, Pete and Joey, who tell us, listen, they're fighting valiantly, those Ukrainians. They've got a lot of heart. They got a lot of soul. They're on the right side. They were attacked, but don't underestimate. The Russians are going to win. They're going to slog this out. And so your guest said, now is the time to rearm them, of course. But when is the time to come to the negotiation table? Because Zelensky is this hero, but he may be the guy who ends up losing all of Ukraine. So at what point do you make a decision as a leader to come to the table? I know he's indicated he wants to do that. Is there anything that can be done at this point so the Russians get what they want, the Ukrainians get at least back some of their country, and these civilians who are just suffering so much can get some relief?
Joey, go ahead.
If you drew a line that followed the Dnieper River, I believe it was General Jack Keane that said in the beginning, here General Kellogg, both have been phenomenal, brilliant through all of this. That kind of splits the country in half. And that line you drew just a few minutes ago is in a similar route. It goes from Crimea up to Kyiv. And so maybe that is the map in the end. We don't know. One thing I will say is kind of to go back to your point about what type of negotiation, if Zelensky says Ukraine can win this war, and that's all he said, and we're going to fight till we do, and Putin says, I've got all the time in the world, well, the Taliban used to say, you may have the watch, we've got the time. If Putin says, I've got the time and resources, I control the narrative in my country, regardless if he's right or wrong, if that's his belief and intent, I mean, yeah, that looks great. I mean, as far as fixing a war, both lose, neither win. That looks great. We'll draw that line, and you keep one half, we'll keep the other. That's not, that's not what Zelensky's fighting for. Not today.
Certainly not. And
that's not what Putin's fighting for.
And I think just like the negotiations that broke down at the beginning, or the demands that Vladimir Putin made. I mean, one of the demands that Vladimir Putin's going to make is that he deposes Zelensky and gets Kiev.
That's his number one demand.
That's his number one objective.
And his number two is demilitarize the entire country.
Correct.
Neither one of those look like there's room for a Ukraine after this.
I think, Rachel, to your point, both can be true. Arming the Ukrainians to be prepared to fight and defend every inch of terrain, true. The Russian military's overwhelming military capabilities, true. The second largest air force in the world is the Russian Air Force, and they've only allocated a small percentage of it. If they wanted to continue to shell and to bomb in these city centers and make it a war of attrition, they're going to be able eventually, likely, to gain that ground. The question is, how much pain do they feel in the process? And then, to your point, and I want to move to the next map real quick so we can move along, is how much pain are the civilians going to feel and Ukrainians going to feel, which is certainly weighs on the heart of Zelensky as he's fighting for his country as well. This is a zoom up of Mariupol. It indeed is the tough one that's under siege. You've got Russians coming in, both sides, as we talked about, and you've got civilians in the middle to include this art school that was recently bombed that we just identified. You've got a maternity hospital that was bombed here. You've got a theater bombed as well, including government buildings that they're targeting. They're ultimately trying to topple the government in Mariupol. When you look at this map, I'm going to zoom in on just this portion to give our viewers a sense of the level of devastation. We had Mike Tobin say 80 to 90% of civilian housing in Mariupol is destroyed. Well, here's why. These are the targets. Buildings destroyed or severely damaged or moderately damaged just in that small portion that I just showed. This area here, heavy with government buildings. This is the previous other government building they showed. And as they, if you've got fields out here that are not easy to defend against armored columns, you effectively have a siege where civilians can't get out. There's nowhere to go. And Russians are counting on the fact that over time they'll be able to lay siege to it and subdue the population.
Pete, everything you've heard about all the experts we've had on, trying to assess Putin's, state of mind, his history, everything about who he is as a person, is, in your assessment, is there an off-ramp for him at this point?
He knows he's losing, but he knows he can't admit it, and he certainly can't back down because backing down is existential to him. That, in my opinion, as a strong man who said, I will, make Russia great again, and I'm going to do it violently through trying to get my stuff back in Kiev and in Ukraine, he can't walk back with a loss. So the question in his mind is, how does he justify what he can sell to his people as a win? I don't know how he does that in his brutal mind without deposing Zelensky, getting rid of that government, and taking control at some level of Kiev. And to me, that means laying siege to the capital city of Kiev,
don't think that,
surrounding it.
But you don't think that taking a significant portion of the eastern part of Ukraine is enough?
To me, that's like taking, as we said, like taking New York State without getting New York City. And in his mind, that means you don't control New York State. And it has such symbolic, in his mind, Russian significance, Kiev, in Ukraine. Religious significance, historical significance, generational significance, that he thinks it's his and wants it back. Because at this point, look at how he's a pariah on the world stage. What does he care about international condemnation? He doesn't care.
In some ways, how this war plays out, where Ukraine is at the end, is almost not as significant as the fact of where we are already. You zoom out 30,000 feet. If Russia left today with every soldier leaving, how do you renegotiate? How do you put back intact our trade and other things with Russia, looking at what's happened in Mariupol, what's already happened? Well, so I think from an American standpoint, geopolitically, this administration has, regardless if the war stopped tonight, tomorrow starts all of that mess. And how do we reconcile that?
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.